How does a civilization that mastered the stars, built pyramids taller than cathedrals, and ruled millions vanish overnight? The Maya didn't just fall, they disappeared into mystery. For centuries, their temples stood like ghost cities, swallowed by jungle, their kings forgotten, their cities silent. But what happened? Was it famine? War? A curse of the gods? Or something even stranger? This is the story of how one of history's greatest civilizations simply vanished. The Maya were architects of genius, carving colossal cities out of stone, their pyramids piercing the heavens, and their knowledge of the stars rivaling modern science. For centuries, their empire thrived, a world of kings draped in feathers and jade, of bustling marketplaces echoing with trade, of priests charting calendars more accurate than ours today. And then, almost without warning, it ended. The once mighty plazas grew silent, the ball courts empty, the temples abandoned. Within a few short decades, jungle vines coiled around pyramids that had taken lifetimes to build. The scribes vanished, the royal dynasties crumbled, and entire cities, capable of housing tens of thousands, were swallowed by the rainforest. To this day, historians and archaeologists are left with the same haunting question. How could a civilization so advanced, so powerful, simply vanish overnight? The story of the Maya begins humbly, in scattered farming villages across the dense rainforests of Mesoamerica. These early people mastered the art of agriculture, coaxing maize, their sacred corn, from the unforgiving earth. Over time, their harvests grew abundant, fueling population booms that would transform small communities into bustling centers of innovation. It was here, in the shadows of the jungle, that one of the most extraordinary civilizations in history quietly took root. As centuries passed, these villages blossomed into mighty city-states. Each was ruled by kings who claimed divine right from the gods, their power embodied in stone temples that climbed skyward. The Maya became master builders, carving limestone into sprawling plazas, ball courts, and towering pyramids that rivaled the grandeur of Egypt. Their cities, from Tikal to Palenque, were not just homes, they were living testaments to a culture that saw no boundary between the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. But the brilliance of the Maya extended far beyond architecture. They were pioneers of astronomy, mapping the movements of the stars with astonishing precision. Their calendar systems could predict solar eclipses centuries in advance, accuracy unmatched until modern times. Mathematics, too, was their domain, with the invention of the concept of zero centuries before Europe would grasp it. To the Maya, numbers and stars weren't just tools, they were divine language, guiding everything from agriculture to war. And with this knowledge, the Maya built an empire of influence that rivaled the great powers of the ancient world. They traded obsidian, jade, cacao, and knowledge across a vast network of cities, weaving together a cultural web that stretched for hundreds of miles. To outsiders, they must have seemed unstoppable, a people blessed by the gods, destined to endure forever. Yet, as history reminds us, even the mightiest civilizations can crumble. Beneath the glittering temples and grand plazas of the Maya world, an invisible pressure was building. The very success of their civilization, the booming cities, the sprawling trade routes, the towering pyramids, demanded more from the land and the people than ever before. Populations swelled, and fertile farmland was pushed to its limits. Jungle was slashed and burned to feed millions, but the earth could only give so much before its richness faded. What was once abundance slowly became scarcity. The Maya kings, still demanding tribute for monuments, wars, and lavish ceremonies, placed crushing burdens on the common people. Farmers worked longer and harder while their yields grew smaller. To keep up appearances of divine favor, rulers commissioned ever grander temples, built on the sweat of a population stretched thin. The brilliance of Maya astronomy and mathematics now served not just to chart the heavens, but to dictate endless rituals meant to appease gods who seemed increasingly silent. Tensions grew inside the cities themselves. Rival city-states, once allies in trade, turned into bitter enemies, competing for dwindling resources and dominance. Warfare became more frequent, blood sacrifices more desperate. Ordinary families, once thriving under the protection of their kings, now bore the brunt of war, famine, and fear. Beneath the surface of dazzling stonework and cosmic wisdom, everyday life was becoming unbearable. And yet, the Maya persisted, believing their gods would deliver them. But the cracks were widening. Exhausted fields, endless wars, and a people growing restless created an unstable foundation for their mighty civilization. The stage was quietly being set for a collapse so sudden and dramatic that centuries later, it would still baffle the world. Then came the droughts, not a single bad season, but decades of withering skies. The rains that once nourished maize fields and filled sacred reservoirs refused to fall. Lakes dried, rivers shrank, and the land cracked under the sun's relentless glare. Without water, crops withered, and famine spread like wildfire. Families abandoned their homes in search of food, their once bustling cities echoing with silence and hunger. Hunger bred desperation. Kings who once claimed divine favor now looked powerless in the face of nature's wrath. As faith in rulers collapsed, rival city-states turned their frustration and fear into open war. Armies marched not just to conquer but to survive, raiding neighbors for food, resources, and captives. The once united web of Maya trade and culture fractured into bitter rivalries, each kingdom clawing for survival. The wars grew bloodier, the sacrifices more desperate. Great temples that had once stood as monuments to order became altars to chaos. Cities that had taken centuries to build were burned and abandoned in mere days. Leaders who promised salvation instead delivered ruin, their thrones toppled as their people starved. And in the end, it was not a single battle or one great disaster, but a perfect storm. Famine, war, and betrayal feeding off each other. As the jungle crept back over plazas and swallowed pyramids whole, it seemed as though the gods themselves had turned their backs on the Maya. Their civilization, once mighty enough to rival the greatest empires of the world, vanished into silence, leaving behind only ruins and riddles. One by one, the great jewels of a Maya world began to dim. Tikal, once echoing with royal processions and the chants of priests, fell silent. Copan, with its towering steely and intricately carved temples, saw its plazas empty. Calakmul, once locked in a centuries-long rivalry for dominance, was abandoned to the forest. These were not minor towns, but cities that had ruled over millions, now reduced to ghostly ruins. The reasons were many, but all tied together in tragedy. Some people fled in search of food, trekking across barren lands, hoping to find rain-soaked fields elsewhere. Others simply walked away from endless wars, weary of serving kings who demanded blood but could not provide bread. For the common Maya, survival mattered more than loyalty to a city-state or even the gods. As they left, the towering temples and stone pyramids, once vibrant with color and ritual, were surrendered to the vines. Jungle roots pried apart stones, parrots replaced priests, and jaguars stalked through what had once been bustling marketplaces. The very cities that had defined Maya power became monuments of loss, swallowed by nature's patience. The fall was not dramatic like Rome's burning or Troy's sack. It was quieter, slower, like a long exhale that never drew breath again. Cities emptied, dynasties ended, but not with a single collapse, with 1,000 small departures that left silence in their wake. Yet even in ruin, the Maya left echoes of greatness. Their temples, though overtaken by vines, still pierced the canopy. Their glyphs, carved deep into stone, still whispered stories of kings, battles, and gods. And their fall, more haunting than any battlefield defeat, left behind one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world, how a civilization so mighty could vanish, leaving only questions for us to chase centuries later. The Maya did not vanish into thin air. Their bloodline endures, carried by millions of Maya descendants who still live across Central America. Their languages are spoken, their traditions honored, and their connection to the land remains strong. To walk through modern villages in Guatemala or Mexico is to hear echoes of an ancient world that never fully died. But the collapse of their great cities remains one of history's most haunting riddles. How could a people who mastered astronomy, mathematics, and monumental architecture, who charted the stars with precision rivaling modern science, see their cities abandoned so suddenly? The answer slips between drought, famine, war, and politics, but never settles into certainty. In this mystery lies a warning. Civilizations, no matter how powerful, are never invincible. They rise through ingenuity and strength, but they can fall through arrogance, exploitation, or forces beyond their control. The Maya's sudden decline is not just an ancient story, it is a mirror reflecting humanity's fragile balance with nature and power. And yet, in their temples rising above the jungle, in their glyphs etched deep into stone, the Maya achieved something greater than empire, memory. Their story endures, not as a vanished people, but as a civilization that still fascinates, still teaches, and still whispers from the shadows of time. History hides more mysteries than answers. Don't miss the next one. Hit subscribe and step deeper into the forgotten realms.